Hi, this is Dr. Daniel Amen. I'm on later than usual, getting ready for the celebration of life for my father tomorrow. And it's his 91st birthday, or would be his 91st birthday. So I've just been thinking about all the amazing times that I had with him and some of the hard times. And as I've been talking about grief, there's really a difference between good grief and bad grief. And good grief is sharing, it's being honest, it's crying if you feel like crying, and it's taking care of yourself in the process and integrating the gift of the other person into your life. So even though my dad's gone, he still is very much alive. And a lot of the really great fun parts of my brain. He's also in the critical parts of my brain because he could be that way. And what I want to do tonight is I have written and rewritten and talked about the poem I'm going to give tomorrow. I'm not sure it's a eulogy. And I'm going to be the last of a number of my siblings who are going to talk. I mean, just thinking of funerals or celebrations of life in the age of COVID-19. It's enough to pull your hair out. Now, that's not how I lost mine. This I got gifted to me from my grandfather on my mother's side. And right before I came in, I was just thinking that tomorrow will be one of the two saddest days of my life. The first one was when my grandfather died in 1982, and he and I were like this. And I just adored him. I never had a conflicted relationship with him. And ever since then, whenever I talk about him or think about him, I cry. And it's just a little weird. But they're not tears. I mean, they're tears of missing him. But I believe of all the people that I've ever known, that I integrated him, his kindness, his ability to connect with other people, his huge heart. For my dad, there's a real strength of character, larger than life, really. And the ability to tell the truth, I really get from my dad, because he was really a no-nonsense person. As you'll hear, because I'm going to practice this with you, that growing up, my dad had, I don't know if they were his favorite words, but they were the most common words. The first one was bullshit. He just said when he didn't agree with something. And that's how he expressed it. And his second favorite word was no. Everything was always no. And when I was an adult, I'm like, Dad, why do you always say no? I don't always say no. But he did. Everybody agreed. And then years later, I heard Tony Blair speak, and he said the hallmark of an effective leader is they say no more than they say yes. And Steve Jobs said, I say no to many great ideas so we can do something truly magical. I'm like, huh. And I think I've adopted both those words. That in my profession as a psychiatrist, my book, The End of Mental Illness, it's like bullshit. Making diagnoses based on symptom clusters with no biological data and then starting to drug people, no. It's just not the right paradigm. And there's no way I would have got that strength of conviction from my grandfather because he was so sweet. I totally got that from my dad. So I don't think this is going to be a long one tonight, but I want to share with you my poem. It's called Good Grief. He's everywhere in my brain. And when I do it tomorrow, I have this really cool slideshow. And unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to do that on Facebook Live. Someday I will. But many of you have asked me to read this, and I thought it would be good practice for me tomorrow. And then tomorrow night, I'll come back and tell you how it went. You know, whenever you have 6 siblings, it's always interesting, even though everybody's heart is great. Do you find this is true? Now, I'm 65. For like 50 years, I have to hear about the things I did that they didn't like. When I'm like 7, it's like, let it go. Hasn't anything else happened in your life? So we'll see how things go tomorrow. I have a great family, and to protect my mom, we'll behave. All right, here we go. You ready? Good grief. He's everywhere in my brain. I see him in every flower that blooms. He was a master gardener. I see him in every brilliant Pacific sunset, which he loved to photograph repeatedly. I see him every time I play cards and someone says gin. He was a master strategist who stomped us all. I see him in his big chair surrounded by his grandchildren. He was a great, great grandfather. I see him in every brain we scan because he helped me invest in our first imaging cameras. And I see him every time I check my Schwab account and look at the UNFI stock he recommended, which goes up and down like my emotions since he left. Good grief, he's everywhere in my brain. I hear his beautiful deep voice saying, Danny, it's your dad, give me a call. I have tangerines, avocados, and lemons. When I want to cry and have good grief, I play his voicemails over and over. I hear him when the television blares too loud, because like me, he has trouble hearing and won't wear his hearing aids. I hear him whenever someone says bullshit or no, or I'm the boss, do what I say. He was a very strong leader. And I hear him when he tells me I can do anything I put my mind to. He encouraged so many people and set us all up for success. I hear him whenever I hear a tennis ball hit a racket, as we had so many great games together. Good grief. He's everywhere in my brain. I sense him whenever I smell a sweet orange from his ranch or a gardenia from his garden. I sense him every time I go into a supermarket. It was his life. I sense him every time someone calls me a maverick because I inherited it from him. I sense him whenever we go on vacation because he taught us that families have fun together. I sense him whenever our very large family gathers, which he and my mother created with love. When I told my mother that cinnamon was a natural aphrodisiac, she hit her forehead and said, "That's why we have 7 kids. He would never leave me alone." Lebanese cook with a lot of cinnamon. Good grief, he's everywhere in my brain. I feel him every time I lift weights, as we did so many Sunday workouts together. I feel him whenever I do a plank, knowing he will go longer than anyone in the room, even me, because he's so stubborn. I feel him every time I walk his dog, Mr. Vinny. I remember buying him for Dad because he was so sad. When the original Vinny died, he loved dogs, sometimes more than his kids. I feel him every time I remember kissing the top of his head when I'd say, "See you next week." And I always will feel his soft hands before they took him away the day he died. Good grief. He's everywhere in my brain and is intricately woven into the fabric of my soul. He was bold, brilliant, outspoken, and the essence of the American dream. I won't lie. Early on, it was hard being his son, the boss's kid. How could anyone live up to the success he created? As a grocer, he fed thousands. He was a leader in his industry and a financial wizard. He was tough, opinionated, and yes, I know some of you don't want to hear it, but he could be brutal. He used to say, "I don't get heart attacks, I give them." In 1980, when I told him I wanted to be a psychiatrist, he asked me why I didn't want to be a real doctor. Why did I want to be a nut doctor and hang out with nuts all day long? It hurt my feelings. He later came to respect what I did and sent me many, many patients. Apparently, he also knew a lot of nuts. Good grief. My father is everywhere in my brain, from longing for his approval as a child while he was away working to build an empire, to adopting his work ethic. He was working the day he died, and I suspect I will be working too when my time comes, to finally being one of my best friends in the last years of his life and the father who was perfect for me. Pray for me tomorrow. Pray for my family. Blessings to all of you. Sort of crazy in a pandemic to do this. Much of it will be broadcast over a video conference, and that's sort of nuts. But it'll still be beautiful because it's a day to celebrate and to really feel the gratitude in our hearts for being touched by someone who is so special.